Hello, everybody. I'm Daizen Ikehara. I'm going to talk about an introduction to XAML, the WPF, and the data binding for modernizing desktop applications. So let me introduce myself first. I'm Daizen Ikehara. I'm a product manager at Infragistics, and currently I'm in Japan office. So I'm responsible for the marketing stuff for Japan as well as the APAC regions. My email is here, my Twitter ID is here. I'll also write a blog, so if you have any questions, you can send a question to this email address or asking about questions to this Twitter ID. So this session is for Windows Homes developers looking for the benefits of moving to XAML. Developers looking to get started on programming in XAML. Also, the developers who would like to know or who would like to use Infragistics WPF UI controls. So this is pretty basic stuff. If you know about XAML or if you have tried WPF, a lot of the topic would be you already know. So just so to remind you, this is for the beginner for the WPF. So today's agenda is first, I'm going to talk about the Windows Phones versus WPF from my perspective. Also that for next 20 minutes, I'm going to introduce the XAML as well as the basics of the data bindings. Also that in this session, I like to focus on the data context binding because this is the binding way that you are going to use most mainly. So it's good to know about the details about this. At last, I'm going to introduce our UI components for the WPF, which is the ultimate UI for WPF controls. So first, if you are a Windows Homes developer and you have been developing Windows Homes application for like 10 years, you are asking yourself or you are asking to others, why should I move to WPF or what should I use WPF? So there's a pros and the cons for Windows Homes, also the WPF. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So if you are using Windows Homes, there are a bunch of pros because it's been around 15 years, almost like 16, 17 years. So a lot of information is available at the web or documentation or like books. So you can find answers very quickly. Also that since it's been long, a lot of people are using Windows Homes, or a lot of people have used Windows Homes in the past. So you can get resources very easy, or you can get a lot of developers very easily. Also that the Windows Homes itself supports WPF. So technically you can use WPF components inside of the Windows Homes, so that you don't necessarily to use WPF itself. Also that vendors like us providing UI controls for the Windows Homes, so you can use those advanced controls to get benefits from that. The recent news is that in .NET Framework 4.7, high DPI is supported, but it's only for Windows 10 creators update. But right now, you can have a way to support high DPI with the latest Windows version. So let's talk about the cons. So since it's easy, but it's like a drag and drop stuff, you can create an application very first. But when you want to customize UI, you are facing problem. You need to control everything in order to make the UI to be customized. So you have to draw yourself, and it's going to be very complex. You have to write a lot of C# code to customize your UI. Also, I would like to point out that it's not impossible, but it's very difficult to create application with a testable. So that means that if you want to change your code very often, you have to test. But the nature of the Windows Forms, it's very difficult to be testable, because you know that you have to wire up events, you have to wire up UI plus code, so that everything is very tightly coupled. So once you change something on the UI, your code may be broken. So it's very hard to maintain or hard to change. So let's move to the WPF pros and cons. When WPF came out like 10 years ago, it was introduced like you can create a very rich application or 3D application very easily. That's true, though. I would like to point out that the more like LOB stuff. So I'm just covering the red lines. So in WPF, you can use the data binding mechanism, which is very powerful. So technically, you don't have to write code behind, or you don't have to wire up events for a lot of the user interactions or like a data changes. So I'm going to talk about that in a later of the decision. Also that if you follow with the patterns like a MVVM, you can separate UI and logic or data, which makes your application more testable, maintainable, or loosely coupled. This makes you to change the code without impacting other things, or like you can change your UI but not impacting the your logic. So that's the reason that WPF is very famous for the LOB app right now. Also that the WPF works with the major Windows versions. Right now, it's supposed Windows 7, 8.1, and Windows 10 for the high DPIs. So if you need to support high DPIs with the major Windows versions, that's WPF the one of the reasons to choose. Also, there are cons. Yeah, I'm going to cover everything here. So Microsoft provides the inbox control, but those are not sufficient. So you have to customize yourself to meet your business requirements. It's almost impossible to create your business application without customizing your WPF controls. WPF provides mechanism to customize UI by styling or by templating, but it's still you have to customize by yourself. That's why we provide our grade or like a chart to the WPF. So in reality, you need to purchase something to make the LOB applications. Otherwise, you have to do by your own. Also, that the biggest cons would be the learning curve. Since the new platform or like a new technologies, it's not like a Windows Forms. It looks like Windows Forms, but you have to learn a lot of XAML stuff in order to make you productive with the WPF applications. So the last one would be the main reasons that the Windows Forms developers tend to avoid using or tend to avoid to try. So I have to ask myself or to ask yourself, why should I choose WPF? So I have a question to yourself, like how often do you update your application after releasing initial versions? After initial versions, there are a couple of requirements coming from business side, like we don't like this UI, or like we wanted new features. If you need to change a lot, maybe WPF would be the best choice. Or like, how long does it take for you to release next version of your applications? Like us, we release twice a year for major version updates. How long do you have to, how often, how long do you take it to upgrade your application? Like you have to release very short life cycle, or you have to release very long life cycle. Also that how much do you need to test, or how much do you test in development phase, or like after initial releases? Do you test after code changes? How much do you test by your own? How much do you run unit tests? Or like which phase of the application lifecycle costs the most for your project? I brought up these questions because the trend of the application development has been changed for like last 5 years or 10 years. It used to be you release initial version, then after 2 or 3 years, you release version 2 to make a major changes. But it's being changed with the this kind of DevOps concepts. So what DevOps means, you develop applications, then you release applications, then the monitoring or get a feedback, then you have to develop again with a very rapid pace. So it's not like a 1 year development life cycle. It's going to be like a 6 month, 3 month. It could be 2 weeks or 1 week or every day. So the recent development model changes, you have to keep up with the business requirements in order to keep your business competitive. So that's the reason, actually, that's the main reason for me to choose WPF right now, because the WPF allows you to make your applications loosely coupled, maintainable, and testable. So that it means that you can change your code more rapidly, or you can change your code with the confidence without breaking anything else. Also, that second reason would be the support the Windows high DPI monitors, if necessary. Though, if you want to support the like a very 4K display or like a more like a bigger screens, WPF would be one of the choices that you can choose. The last reason is the reason from Microsoft actually. So since WPF, their UI technologies, well, their UI platform requires XAML. So if you are living in a Microsoft world and you choose to keep up with the Microsoft technology, you have to learn XAML anyways. So if you haven't, I recommend to do that right now so that you can move on to the other platforms like Silverlight, Windows Store Apps, UWP, Xamarin Forms. Everything supports XAML. It's not like 100% equally, but the basic concept is the same. So once you learn XAML, you can adapt those technologies. So here are my 3 reasons, and I'd like to show the data binding stuff, which is very powerful for WPF. So if you get started, I recommend that's the first one to you learn. So this is the reason that I recommend that you start for the WPF for your new project. If you have the existing Windows Homes project, you don't necessarily have to move on. You can stay with the Windows Homes for maintenance. But if you plan to create a new versions or like a upgrade or like having the major version upgrades, I recommend you to consider to move on to the WPF. So if you have any questions, you can type questions in the question box so that I will answer the as much as I can. So next section, I'm going to introduce the XAML. So if you haven't done anything about the XAML thing, this is the best place to start. So what is XAML? XAML stands for the Extensible Application Markup Language. This is the this is typo actually XML-based language developed by Microsoft. So it's extended by Microsoft. It's developed by Microsoft. It's the extension of the XAML XML. Also, this is similar to HTML. You can use this language to declare UIs. So here's one of the examples. So you put the tag for button, you set the attributes and the values, which represents your UI. So actually, I have the project here. So like I showed, this is the XAML. If you drag and drop anything on the design surface, the XAML will be generated, or you can edit XAML here directly to make it changes. So these are basic XAML that you can use. So everything that you type is reflected to this design surface. So if you writing the property which is not exist, then you get errors or something like that. So let's go back to the slide. So when you write XAML, there are a couple of ways to write XAML stuff. So the basic stuff is that attribute syntax, which is going to be you specify attribute name equal double quotation value double quotation. So attribute name is the CL member name of the property. So in this example, I set the vertical alignment property, font size property, font weight property, also the content property for the button. The value would be a string, which is converted to the respectable object type. For example, font size is actually 72 as a string, but it's interpreted as double after the XAML parsing engine. So if you set the property with the unsupported type, because this is font size is the double, and if you set the not double, then you get errors like here. Okay, so this is the basic stuff. So when you type XAML, you usually use this attribute syntax. Also, there's another way to set the value for the attribute. So this is called the property element syntax. Let's say, for example, some properties cannot be represented in attribute syntax, which means some properties cannot be typed in a string. Like I said, like I show here, image object itself cannot be represented by strings. So sometimes you have to use this type of the syntax for that. So in order to use this property element syntax, you use the property element syntax, attribute name tag, value itself, then closure tags. So the result would be the same, but you can have the proper mechanism with that. So let me show here. So right now, content would be the WPF, but you can also set button content here, WPF. So right now, this is the string, but you can't put anything inside of that for now, because content property is the object. So that, any class which inherits from object, you can put that stuff here. So that's the content property attribute. You can directly set the value of the property that is defined as a content property attribute. So in the previous slide, I set the button.content explicitly. but actually you can skip that. You can omit the button.content tag because content is the marked as the content property attribute. So you can name this tag. You can see the same result. And also that, like I said, many cases, this content property is object type, so you can put anything inside of the disclosure if the class or object or class instance inherits from the object type. So let's say I can put here rectangle, width is 100, height is 100, fill blue. So now you see the blue rectangle on in the bottom as the content. So if you are using both content property as well as the property element syntax, you can define the complex UI inside of the XAML. So this means you don't have to write C# code to create a complex UI. You can customize your XAML to achieve the very complex UI. So this is just for example. You put the image and text inside of the button. When you use the Windows Homes, it's going to be difficult because you have to manage the images, or like you have to set a place for the text by C# code. So not many people can do that, but in WPF, almost everybody can do that. So this is the power of XAML, that this is power of the WPF can achieve with the UIs. So if your customer or your project requires very complex UI, you may not have to purchase the third-party libraries. You can just extend your UI with the feature of the existing controls. So for example, this could be an image button, but you don't have to extend your button class in order to support these kind of the image button. So yeah, the same thing. I have my code here. Yeah, so this is the button XAML. So you set the content for the stack panel, which supports layouts. And in the stack panel, you have the two elements, the image, also the text bar. So this is just an example of how XAML works, or like what you can get from the XAML. So once you learn it, it's going to be easy. So this is the base stuff. So let's move on to the data binding with the DataContext 101 stuff. So in a XAML platform, you can use data binding, which is very powerful, which reduces your code. So let me talk first. So data binding is a mechanism to connect a property of an object, which is called target, and another object or property, that is called source. So basically, you connect target and the source with the data binding. The power of data binding is that when one value is updated, the other one also updated in many ways. It's like a one way or two ways, or target to source. Also, that this data binding can be declared in a XAML. So you don't have to write a C# code or VB code in order to make it happen. Actually, Windows Forms supports data binding as well, but you have to write a lot of code. So if you can use XAML, then it's going to be very easy for you to make two objects connected. So I would say pros for the Windows Forms developers. You don't have to need to wire up events for the your UIs. Like let's say, for example, in a Windows Forms, you may have the code something like this. When user clicks or checks with the radio box or checkbox, you hide or visible some of your UIs in that same screen. You may be able to achieve with that without writing the code, but just setting up the data binding stuff. So UI will be updated based on values or like a data. But there's a con for Windows Forms developers. If you haven't learned about the data bindings, you need to learn how to use it, how it's working. So today I'm going to cover the very basic stuff, and also that I skip a lot of the the other things. So my hope is to you understand the power of the data bindings with the data context. Then you can learn the other stuff for the data bindings. There are many stuff to you learn in order to use data binding more efficiently. So I suggest that you take a look for the resources in the later session to learn about the data bindings. So to support data binding, WPF provides the dependency property, which is the extended property for the CLR property. This dependency property supports these kind of the stuff used in the WPF. So resources, data bindings, animations, metadata overrides, property value inheritance, WPF data integration. So basically, when you type in XAML, I would say 90% of that would be, well, like nearly 100% would be the dependency property you're dealing with. You don't have to be aware of the dependency property when you type in XAML, but in the behind the scene, dependency property is actually used. So this example, you type the text box and you set the text. So the text is actually the dependency property, which supports the these mechanics. So with this dependency property, if you want to use binding, it's going to be you set text brackets, bindings, element name, or other options, and also you set path. So this means that text box.text property is target. Also that name of slider 1 and its value property is a source. So you actually connected two things, slider's value with the text box text property. So this is a very famous example for the data binding. So I'm not going to detail, just showing the code here and see how it's working. So since you are connecting slider's value with the text box text, when you move the slider, value property will be changed. Also, the text will be updated as well. And if you change the value inside of the text box and you leave the control, then slider's value will be also updated, because these are two-way bindings. So if you change one thing, then you change the other one. I don't mention that about like a binding mode or like an update source trigger thing, but I'm going to show that here. So if you set one way, this means you set binding mode to only one way from source to target. So when you change sliders value, the text box will be changed. But if you type the inside of the text box, the sliders value will not be changed. This is one way. Also the one time. So in order to make this happen, I set the value is 5. Here. So initially the sliders value would be 5, so the text box text would be 5 as well. But after that, when source is changed, target would not be changed. So it only works one time. WPF provides the fourth option, which may not be available in other platforms like Silverlight or like a UWP. This is the one way to source. This is the reverse the binding mode for the target. So when you set the value in the target, let's say 3, so that will be changed. But if you change the sliders value, source value, target will not be changed. Also, there's a code update source trigger, which means when you update target, which timing is the source updated. So you can set this timing explicitly, like a property change means when target value is changed, right after that source value will be changed as well. I'm getting error here. Let me see. Oh yeah, here. So as soon as I change value here, without losing focus, you get the source value will be updated as well. Or there are other options, like when you set the lost focus, which is the default behavior for this time. When you lose focus from a control, you get the updates for the values. Or like if you set explicit, you need to call a method to update the value for the source. So this is pretty basic. So this should be easy. So if you want to use data binding stuff, you have to two stuff. One is the target, another is the source. Also, that target should be dependency property, and you have to set the binding expression for the target property. And you can use the like options like element name, path, binding mode, or like update source trigger. So when you set the binding source, there are a couple of ways to set the source. First one would be the element name, which I just showed. So if you have the source in the visual tree and it has name, you can set the name for the binding source. So you use the element name attribute and set to the name for the UI control, or like a name of the name inside of the visual tree. Also, that there are other ways to set source, like a source property, relative source property, also the data context property. So you have to choose either one of 4. So you cannot set the element name and source at the same time. So I'm going to show the example for the source binding here. So what I did was that I set the string inside of the resource dictionary. This is actually a data, not like a UI or control. So the inside of the resource dictionary, you can store the data or like a settings or like a UI and everything, but it doesn't exist in the visual tree. Also that inside of the text block, I set the bindings for the text property. Not like the previous example, instead of the having element name, I set source property. And the source would be the this string. So the text would be showing that this is string. When you run it, you get the same result as the designer window. So what you can do with a source binding, you can set a path, which means this is the string, so it's a combination of the characters. So also this class has a length property inside of that. So you get the result. So it counts this string and this length. So it's going to be 14. When I change here, it gets changed. So if you know the object which can be source, you can put the path property to go into deeper. Let me show you one more thing. So like I said, this is the string and the characters. So if you specify the address or like a index, so 0 would be D, T, then 1 is H, 2 would be I. So yeah, this is something like I'm setting the text to the array of characters. So this is the source binding. So if you know the source object and you want to get in deeper, you can use this source binding. Also that relative source. So this is the relative source example. So you have the title on the background. What this works is that, so if I change this main window to my window, the Windows title will be changed. Also that if I change the background color to here, Windows background color will be changed. So what I did was that I was using the relative source as a source, and I used the ancestor type, which is window, then pass it to title. What that means is that this binding mechanism going up from this text block to the upper hierarchy, so that it tries to find the type of the window class or window object inside of the tree, and when you find it, you bind the title property to the text property. So if you turn in option and debugging general, the enable here, enable UI debugging tools for XAML, you can actually check with the UI visual tree elements when you run your application in a debug mode. So let's run the application. So you get this black square rectangles. So enable selection, display layout add-ons. So when you click it, you see the live visual tree, you know that this text block belongs to the grid, this grid belongs to the content presenter belongs to the add-on decorator, belongs to the border, and will reach up to the main window. So this is actually a window. So when you use relative source, you can go up from the yourself to the upper side, upper hierarchy, to find a type. So if you are sure you know that there's a type with your ascendance, then you can set this relative source. The same thing, the background here also goes up this hierarchy to find the window here. Then bind to the background color to the text block, the actual text box. So like I said, you can have the multiple ways to set the binding source, either name or source object itself, or like you can retrieve the hierarchy for the visual tree. And the last one would be the data context. This is the very powerful, and I would say 80–90% of data binding you are using would be this data context binding, because very flexible, or you can store data, you can store actual logic inside of that. So let me talk about data context. So what is data context? This is implemented in framework element class, which is the very basic class for the WPF or like XAML platforms. And one very unique characteristics is that it inherits the parent's data context value in the visual tree. So I showed a visual tree in the last demo. So like this string has the window, the grid, another grid, also the grid, and a text box here. So this text box data context can inherit from the upper grid, grid, and the window. So when you set the Windows data context property or something, then you can use the value or data inside of this text box. So this is how it works with the data context. And you can use this data context for the binding. So if you set the data binding without specifying any source, the source would be set as your data context property. So text box data context property, which means the Windows.data context. So I'm going to show that. So let's start with the here. So actually, you can set the data context in XAML. So you already see the result. So this text box is having the data binding for the text property, and you don't specify the source, so it goes to the text box data context, which goes to the this data context. So what you can do is that if you specify the data context in the code behind or from the logic, then you get the data here from the data context. Also that I have the button here, which implements the change data context. So I actually set the here So this logic just changes the Windows data context property. Here. So when this button is clicked, this logic will be executed. So this changes the main Windows data context property to changed, which refers to the your UI's data or your UI's text itself. So this is the very basic stuff for here. So you can use this mechanism to provide the necessary data for the window, and you can use data binding to show that, also that you can have the data for screen, you can have the data changed by end user, you can have the data updated by logic. So you can store the old data which is necessary for the window, and you can store the data which your end user is changing, so that you can have the whole set of the data for the window, or whole set for the screen. So I have another UI here. Show also that instead of setting the string to the data context, you can have this class which stores the data for the window, or it could be you can retrieve the data from database for the collection, or a table data, and you can store that data inside of this class and pass it to your UI, and the UI uses data binding to show the list of the data. So in this case, instead of setting the string here, I'm gonna set instance of the this simple class with my name. So I'm gonna change it to Daizen 2 here. So in order to use this class, I'm gonna set the path to here. So I have my name as a property name. So I'm gonna change here to my name. Also, I'm going to change the here so that you see the actual data here. So let's see how it works. So right now, the Windows data context has a simple class which has the my name property field. So I can bind to the text box text to that my name property, and when you show it, yeah, the data will be the same. Also, that when user types any data, let's say user types the amount of the sales you make, so 200, the actual data stored behind the scene also updated. There's the one thing you have to know about that is that if you change the data not from the UI but also the logic, so if you change the data from the logic, what you can get. So let's change this data context change to here. So wait a minute. So what does is that it gets the data context from the window and cast it to the simple data class, and also the access to the my name property and change to the webinar. what is going to happen is that when you show it, it's Daizen 2. When user type it, it changes to the updated value here. But if you change the data from logic, UI wouldn't change, but the actual data would be changed. So if you are using data binding with a data context and you want to store the data inside the data context, there's a case you have to update your data behind the logic. So let's say you run the business logic to update the sales amount, like having a discount rate or like adding tax, which is not initiated from the user input. Then you have to have a mechanism to notify UI with the changes. So what it does is that instead of having like this simple class, you have to have here you have to implement iNotify property changed, which notifies the value change to the UI thread. So this is the same thing, string my name, but it's actually having the private field. And whenever the value is updated, it checks the value is the same or not. If it's not the same, you invoke this property change event. With that, I'm showing the Daizen 2 here. Again, if user changes the stuff, it goes to be updated. Also that logic updated data and the UI is also updated. So if you are using data context with the data binding, you can store the data which are necessary for the string, but you have to also implement iNotify property change. This is kind of the must-have thing. So once you learn it, you just use that. Actually, the basic is like this, and if you want to create a complex UI, the basic concept would be the same. Like you want to use list, you want to use grid, everything uses data context, and also that every UI has the data context property. So when you want to use the data grid with the collection of the class, well, collection of the data, each row has the data context as a UI, so that each row's data context contains the each row data. So like here, so if you are buying to the data from this table, you actually this data grid row has a data context property, and also that one of cell uses that data context with the binding path. So this means something like a binding path or the equal to or the ID or something like that. So if you study about the data context and data binding for everything, you can extend your knowledge to create very complex UI with the WPF. So I have a sample screen. So this is the have 3 requirements. One is would like to show an employee's information, like an employee ID, employee name. Also that I would like to show the list of the customer that this employee has. Also that I would like to show all the data for the one of customers, which is selected by UI. So if you are using Windows Homes, you may have to wire up events. So let's say when this one is clicked, you initiate the event handler, and you get data from the database, or you get it from the collection to bind to the all the data to the data grid. but I'm gonna show how it can be done with the WPF with the data binding. So first, I'm going to set the UIs. So in employee ID and employee name, I'm going to use text block to show the data. Also that I'm going to use list box on the left side to show the collection of the customers. Also that I'm going to use data grid for the collection of the orders, which is selected by user in a list box. So this is just one of the examples that you can achieve. So I'm architected the class. So I'm going to provide a class with the employee, which has the three properties. One is the employee ID, is a string. Another one is the employee name for the string. So you can store the data here. Also that I architected I'm going to have the list of customers, which contains the collection of the customers. Inside of the customer class, I have three properties again. One is the customer ID, another one is the customer name. The last one would be the orders, which is the list of orders. So each customer has the list of the orders, and each order has three properties again: order ID, order date, sales. So if you have business class or like a data class like this, you can bind this employee class instance to your window so that each UI can use data binding to leverage those data. Let's see. So like I said, I have I created this main window view model class, which I use this property notifier. Goes to the here. Oops. Go to definition here. Yeah. Actually, this implements the iNotify property change interface. So let's just focus on the main window view model, and it contains the employee. So the instance of the employee. Also, that employee contains the ID, name, also the customers. So customers contains customer ID, customer name, also the orders. The order has the order ID, order date, and sales. So what would I do is that I just added to the data context to this main window view model instance. So this main window view model instance has the one employee. So you can use that data inside of the this screen. So since the window has the main window view model, you can use the here, actually here. So this whole grid binding to the main window view models employees property. So this whole grid contains the employee information. Also, this employee ID contains the employee ID information. Also, the employee name here. So you can just bind into it. Then next, click 2, which is the here. Let me pin to the active container. So the section or region, which is colored by yellow, contains the all customers information here. And here, like here, yeah. So the grid with the arrow rectangle contains the customers information, and I'm going to use the customers information inside in the list box here. Also that I'm going to use the customers orders inside of this data grid control. So actually, what you can get is that when you run it, you have like this screen. So you have the employee ID here from the employee class, so employee name from the employee class. Also that here list box has the customer name, customer ID, and the customer name. So when you click it, data grid shows the data of the cells belongs to this customer. So like I said, if you are using Windows Forms, you may need to wire up the event handling stuff. So whenever this box is selected, you have to feed in the data for the order in the code behind. But right now, the only code I have in the code behind is that setting data context to the main window view model. And this main window view model class doesn't implement the operational code other than generating data here. So what I just achieved is that I pass it to the old data, which is necessary for the screen, and the data context property is the only connector point. So with the UI and the data, it's connected only here. So technically, you can just test this class here with a unit test and see every logic that implements here is working or not, without running actual UI testing here, because just this UI is just representing the result of this data. Yeah, so I use the data binding path, so you can pass the bound data to the like this color one. So yellow is green is here, red is here, purple is here. So you can learn data binding for just 1 hour, but there are a lot of to learn stuff. So I have not covered like a data binding basic stuff. I did some of them. Also that haven't covered value converter or like a templating thing or validation of the data inside of the data binding. Also that notify changes to UI or initiating business logic from the UI. So I recommend you to read the MSDN document first, because that covers like a basic stuff for the data binding. Also that once you run WPF, next I would recommend that you try with the Prism, which is the framework provides a lot of the libraries or features to make you to create loosely coupled, maintainable, testable application for WPF, or in UWP or Xamarin Forms. So last, I'm gonna talk about like 5 minutes more about introducing about WPF controls. So I only covered like a WPF or XAML basics today. If you learn, or after you learn about WPF, you are going to create your own applications. So what we can provide is that we provide the WPF control, which implements the custom UI or like features, so you can use those features. And what you can get is something like this. You can get chart, you can get that grade, so you can create your own application with those data. Or like we are providing Office UI stuff, so you can create an Outlook application, or like looks like a PowerPoint application for your WPF applications. Also, when you use the our control, we provide a configurator, which is we visually design controls. So you don't have to type properties. You can just choose options, or you can choose data bindings here and choose features very easily. Also, we also provide reference applications, so you can look at the implementation, or like you can use the reference app, which you can achieve with our components. So I'm just going to show quickly about our grid with the grid configurator, which we recently released. So I was using data grid here. So I'm going to comment it out. So I'm not going to change any data or the logic behind that. I'm just changing the UI here. So this is our grid. I'm gonna put here. Let's have the pointer here. So make it bigger here. %. So initially, you have to set the property here in order to bind the data here. But we provide configurator here, so you can open up the configurator inside of the XAML editor, and it shows the necessary property that you have to set. So in order to use data grid, you have to set data source property, and the configurator provides data binding wizard. So you can choose class instance to bind the data here. So in this case, I'm going to bind all the data inside of the application. So I'm going to just choose the customers, customer class, which has the orders here. So it creates bindings. Also that here you can see the order layout here. So these are columns you can add. So I'm going to use order ID. I'm going to use the order date. Also that I'm going to use the sales data. And each field you can set the label. So instead of having order ID, let's say order number here, order date. This is okay, but like order on or something like that. And sales, the sales amount. So you can change the properties for each field, and you can set the features here. So I don't want the user to change order number, so I'm going to disable allow edit here. Also that I don't want user to change sales amount for this time, so I'm disable that. Also that you can set the horizontal alignment in any type if you want. For order date, I want to use filtering, so I can filter out. I'm going to use Excel style here. So you can use the Excel-like dialog window. Also, I'm going back to the order ID, order number field. The fixing, which means that you can pin one of the columns to the far or near side of the grid. So I'm going to use the near, so that you can use this feature to pin one of your columns. So let's save it out. To see, yeah, there are a lot of the UI here. I'm not sure why I'm getting this one, but let's move it out here. Yep. So everything you set in the configurator, you can get the result with the XAML code. So you don't have to type anything in order to having the grid is configured. So I'm going to run this one. So I haven't set the width of the grid, but you see the result. So whenever I choose the customer, you get the data updated like a normal data grid does. Also, this grid provides the Excel style filtering, so I can choose one of the month to merge here. Also, I cannot edit anything here because I disabled that. But you can choose the order on field. Also, this grid provides the here group drag and drop group by features. So I'm running on JP Windows, so it shows the Japanese format. But if you run on the English Windows, then it shows the like last month, like 3 weeks ago or something like that. So you can group by the dates, or like if you have types, you can group by types. Also, you can move the field around, like moving from left to right or right to left, or you can make the multiple layouts with our data grid. So this is the end of the webinar. So if you are interested in learning XAML, I recommend you to read MSDN topics, especially for XAML basics, also data binding overview. Also, there are a couple of courses available through our site. So if you have a subscription, or if you are an MSDN subscriber, you may be able to take a courses for the WPF. Also, that after you learning the WPF basic fundamental stuff, I strongly recommend to try with the Prism and the MVVM patterns, because which makes you to create the loosely coupled testable maintainable application with the guidance. So you have the guidance to follow. Then after that, you have the very completed applications. Also, that we provide the UI controls. So if you want to try or if you want to test, you can go to the Ultimate UI for WPF product page. Also, that the product manager of the XAML product at Infragistics is Brian Lagnas. He's actually author of the Prism also. So if you're learning WPF, if you want to learn Prism, if you want to learn about our stuff, I also recommend you to read his website or his blogs or his presentation. So once again, if you want to try it out, you can go to the www.infragistics.com/products/WPF. So you can download the trial. You get a 30-day trial for free. You can get support for free for 30 days. So that's everything from my session. If you have any question about this session or product, it's now time for the QA, or you can send a question to the Apex sales at infragistics.com. Okay, so once again, if you have any questions, please send us email or ask me about it directly. I'm going to write up the follow-up blog entry so you can get presentation and demos, also that recorded videos. Okay, so this is the end of the session. Thank you for coming today. I hope you enjoyed or you learned something. Also that, again, if you have any questions, please let us know. We are planning to have other webinar series. So if you want us to cover the topics or platforms or technologies, please let us know. We're gonna schedule that. Yeah, okay. Thank you for that comment. Yeah, I've got a question that if we are going to distribute presentation and demos, yes, we will. That I'm going to post the follow-up topic here. So this is my blog for the Infragistics site. So if you go to the this link, you can see my topics here. So I'm going to post my presentation and demos here. Okay, so this is the end of the webinar. Again, thank you for joining us and hope you have the wonderful day or afternoon.